Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another video. I don't think we're realizing just how important certain scenes of Ahsoka Part 7 Dreams and Madness were, not just in the context of setting up the final episode next week, but also the Mandoverse more broadly. We now know precisely where this show fits in the timeline. It takes place after the events of The Mandalorian Season 3. Carson Tavor confirms this when he mentions the conflict on Mandalore. This was a very Ki-Adi-Mundi moment. What about the droid attack on the Wookiees? Well, what about the conflict on Mandalore? And Hamato Xiono confirms this by stating that he believed Gideon worked on his own, he was just an isolated warlord, and not part of something greater, which of course is wrong. He was part of the Shadow Council, the one that is waiting for Thrawn's return. I'm really happy with the way this episode dealt with the New Republic, the cracks and disagreements in the government, the fractures therein, and the greater problems this is eventually going to lead to. I'm going to talk about this in greater depth later in the video. On a general note with this episode, we should be very pleased as fans they set up Rick Famuyiwa's big finale next week in such a fitting way. Having our heroes united on Peridea, Thrawn is ready to leave, with his tactical mindset, always playing the long game, always trying to be one step ahead of his enemy, was really well written and very much reminiscent of Thrawn from the expanded universe. I've already seen some fans turn on this episode, because I spoke to some for the penultimate installment. They wanted something a bit more flashy, but the emphasis is on the storytelling, something Part 7 did greatly. And the gems in this episode are all thanks to its subtleties, and we're going to focus on those. So let's dive into some key moments, some key scenes, key references and connections to the wider Star Wars universe, and we begin with Hera Syndulla's trial. As we found out a couple of weeks ago, she's been recalled to New Republic headquarters in order to be reprimanded for the mission to Cetos, which was not authorized. She faces a really tough trial, and to nobody's surprise, given what we saw in earlier episodes, Hamato Xiono is the biggest ass in that government. I've said it before and I'll say it again, he is the canon version of failure. He's going to be the biggest reason for the downfall of this republic. Some fans say he's an Imperial in disguise, but that doesn't make too much sense, given what we know about him and his son later in the timeline. Of course, his allegiance before the Battle of Endor is questionable, and as we know, he kind of just stood on the fence. But in terms of not heeding warnings, not taking the right things seriously, we know the New Republic eventually fails, and he is the perfect embodiment of that ineptness. I don't know if you know this, but the design of the courtroom was taken directly from Heir to the Empire's comic adaptation. And given the fact we know both in canon and in legends that Admiral Ackbar is a central component of this government, I thought he was the one sat next to Xiono. But if it was him, I think they would have made a bigger deal, they would have gotten him to talk. This Mon Calamari, just like Lieutenant Beta, could be new. In either case, this one is uncredited. Now of course we have to talk about the biggest cameo of the episode, which I was aware was coming. Everyone's favourite legendary protocol droid, C-3PO through Leia Organa, who sent him, saves Hera. He shows the data transcript which claims to provide proof that Leia authorized the mission to Cetos, which of course she didn't beforehand, but she is now after the fact. You see, Leia is a mother, just like Hera. She gets it. Leia understands the importance of family, and she knows Hera. She knows she would have had good reason to be going to Cetos in the first place. She's been covering for General Syndulla, and I think this was a great addition to the show. In the Mandoverse, we've now seen R2 with Luke, we've now seen 3PO. When 3PO arrives, and we hear Anthony Daniels' voice, it was like hearing a family member or a friend that you've not seen for many years. Something you hear often about Disney Plus shows is that they feel very disconnected from the films. Well, this was a moment of familiarity, just like when Luke and R2 appeared in Mando Season 2, that really grounds the show and puts into perspective how important this story is, not just for what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are doing, but also the overall Skywalker saga as well. And when 3PO appeared, a part of me was hoping, are we going to hear a Wookiee growl in the background, or maybe a certain smuggler appear? But you know what? This cameo more than sufficed, and it fit the story. It wasn't just random fan service, it had a good purpose considering Leia was mentioned earlier in the season. And now she sent 3PO. Who doesn't love 3PO, seriously? As a massive fan of Andor, seeing Mon Mothma in the flesh was great, and not as a hologram. The Chancellor of the New Republic is headquartered on Coruscant, but it's well known in canon it shifts around. Sometimes it's Chandrila, and sometime soon they're going to move to Hosnian Prime. I think we're witnessing in real time how amazing Rangers of the New Republic was going to be. It's being adapted to some extent in The Mandalorian and the Ahsoka show, and eventually Dave's movie, which is now rumoured to be titled Hand of the New Republic, according to a wild rumour that emerged a couple of days ago, so I do imagine these scenes and these episodes are crucially important. So moving on, this episode also gave us the remaining lines by Hayden Christensen from the trailers and TV spots, Anakin's hologram, one which dates back to the early Clone Wars when he's training Ahsoka, and now as she's practicing her forms, practicing for the big battles on Peridea, she's listening to it for motivation. Did you guys notice he name drops Asajj Ventress, Grievous and Count Dooku? It was a moment for the fans to be like, oh yeah, I remember those characters, and Asajj specifically, with everything going on with the Night Sisters and the Night's Mothers, was a fitting name drop. And in my video which I posted yesterday, I talk about her importance and why Dave Filoni's wanted to resurrect her for years. Another important moment in this episode was the debris field, reminiscent of the asteroid field in The Empire Strikes Back. In fact, there are multiple moments that call back to Empire. For example, when Ahsoka reaches out to Sabine in the Force, in the same way that Vader did to Luke at the end of episode 5, when he says, "It is your destiny." And we see this across the saga as well. Leia does this to Ben in The Rise of Skywalker, but what's interesting is that Sabine is receptive to it. And speaking of Sabine, she and Ezra catch up. Ezra finds out about the rebel victory at the Battle of Endor, and the Empire is now destroyed. There is a new government called the New Republic, and Palpatine is dead. Or so Sabine claims. Did you catch the way she says it? There was hesitancy. She words it, "That's what people say," instead of "yes, he's dead." A little nod to the fact he eventually returns. In this conversation, there was a little nugget that was massive. We finally learn what Orrelios' new role is in the New Republic after his cameo in The Mandalorian Season 3. He trains new recruits, but still no mention of Agent Kallus. So moving on to Thrawn, as I mentioned in my last breakdown, he knew Anakin Skywalker and is surprised he was Ahsoka's master. Morgan Elsbeth pulls up this info in the Inquisitorial database. It was so cool to hear mentions of Inquisitors, and of course in Rebels, Ahsoka faced many of them. What's truly fascinating going into the last episode is that Thrawn is ready to depart. All of his commands to mercenaries and night troopers were a distraction. The cargo is loaded and ready, and he's prepared to return to the known galaxy, where Hera Syndulla, along with Mon Mothma, who now believes her by the way, while the rest of the New Republic don't, are in for a rude awakening. We're not supposed to know the full extent of what Thrawn is up to at this stage. He has something greater up his sleeve. And so finally, my dear friends, let's talk about some of our Force users. In earlier episodes, I predicted that Baylan and Shin are going to separate. Baylan effectively abandons Shin. I think she's going to defect to the good guys. That was foreshadowed in a huge way. Baylan ordered Shin to do all the work, to kill Sabine and Ezra, because he claims his destiny and fate lie elsewhere. He is effectively abandoning her. This was a send-off from master to apprentice, and he gives her one final piece of advice: impatience for victory will guarantee defeat. A very similar lesson that Obi-Wan gives to Anakin. Another reason I think Shin is going to defect is that Sabine says she is just like Ezra, but without the sense of humour. It set up the last episode so well. For now, Shin is scared of defecting. Ahsoka gives her the choice. She ran away. But I think it's coming. And once again, we have no idea what Baylan's gonna do, but the episode was titled after the way he describes Peridea, dreams and madness. On Shin Hati's command, the bandits chase Ezra and Sabine in a scene that was leaked by Rotten Tomatoes earlier on Tuesday. As you would expect, the Noti have Ezra's back. As a group of travellers, which we learned in the last episode, due to the uncertainties that the wasteland of Peridea holds, they pack up and carry their homes with them everywhere they go. And visually, this scene is extremely reminiscent of They Fly Now, the scene from The Rise of Skywalker on Pasaana. We also learn that the Noti are a peaceful people, which makes a lot of sense. And it also explains why they don't have very high quality weaponry. We literally see one of them use a slingshot. Although the poetry here is that in Rebels, Ezra used an energy slingshot, and here in this scene, the Noti, the people defending him, who housed him all these years, also use one. Although a more primitive kind, that doesn't use energy pellets. It was also fantastic to see Sabine Wren use her two iconic pistols, the We-Star 35 blaster, of which Sabine has two, customized blue and yellow, which she carries in her thigh holsters. This weapon was very popular with Mandalorians, notably the Death Watch. It was a fun sequence that reminds us that Star Wars can have a bit of joviality amongst more intense episodes as well. The second duel between Baylan and Ahsoka was insane. All of Ahsoka's moves were cut short by Baylan's attempts to use powerful swings. She closed down the space between them and she aimed for the blade above his hilt. Both proficient Force users, and Ahsoka truly frustrated Baylan. Another thing that was predicted before the episode was Ezra's use of Kung Fu, telling Sabine to keep his lightsaber, and he was a badass. As aforementioned, I believe Ezra is more powerful than we know. Our heroes are reunited, and now everything's in place for a crazy finale next week. Fingers crossed it's a long one, and there's a very good chance Thrawn departs Peridea before our heroes. Are they going to be left stranded there, setting up season 2? What did you guys think? Did you enjoy this episode? If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.